Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're pleased to have our final virtual field day of 2020, featuring the Middle Cedar Watershed and the importance of wetlands, not only in the Middle Cedar Watershed, but across the state of Iowa. Hello, everyone. I am Liz Ripley. I am the Conservation and Cover Crop Outreach Specialist for the Iowa Learning Farms. We are based on campus at Iowa State University, and we've been around since 2004. And our goal is to build a culture of conservation by working with farmers and researchers to implement practices that improve water quality and soil health while remaining profitable. So I want to thank everyone who's attended all of our virtual field days this year. That's been fantastic. We've really appreciated your feedback as we've worked to kind of perfect or continue to work on, I shouldn't say perfect, these virtual field day experiences for everyone this year. And these events are made possible thanks to our great partners, which include the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, the US EPA Section 319 funds, Conservation Districts of Iowa, Iowa Farm Bureau, Practical Farmers of Iowa, Growmark Inc., Iowa Agriculture Water Alliance, Iowa Corn, and the Iowa Nutrient Research Center. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get too much further in here. Please do remain muted during the video portion and while speakers are presenting, but then we will invite you to unmute to ask your questions of presenters following the video and a brief discussion today. So this afternoon, following today's event, you will receive an email from ilf@iostate.edu asking you to give your feedback for today's event, because this is only the start of the conversation, the exchanging of ideas. It's really important to network with other folks that couldn't be here. And a benefit of these virtual field days is that they are being recorded. So if someone you know couldn't make it today live, you can always share the recording with them. That will also be included in your evaluation email. If you would like, there's an opportunity to also provide your mailing address, and we'll provide you with a free ILF NetGator as well. So I'm really pleased to have with us today Adam Rodenberg. He's the project coordinator for the Middle Cedar Watershed, and Matt Lechtenberg, the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship Water Quality Coordinator. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and take a closer look at one of the projects going on in the Middle Cedar, and then we'll have some great questions and discussion.
My name is Adam Rodenberg. I'm the project coordinator for the Middle Cedar Watershed. It's part of the Iowa Watershed Approach project. We are here at the Wolfgram Wetland site in rural Tama County, approximately 6 miles west of the city of Traer. This wetland treats about 1,100 acres of upstream watershed, mostly row crop acres, and has a pool area of about 8 acres once it is filled up. As of right now, we just completed this project about a week ago, so there isn't water in it yet, but we'll be working on filling it up by next spring. This site does not have any special habitats around the pool area. On the downstream side of this wetland, we had stream mitigation requirements as part of the Army Corps of Engineers permit, which incorporates about an 1/8 mile buffer and stream bank stabilization project. This site was built on a cattle pasture and old farmstead property that is still intended to be grazed, and so we incorporated a lot of cattle fencing to keep cows out of the wetland and prevent them from getting injured or dying, getting stuck in the mud, those sorts of things. So the landowner is still able to graze cows in and around this site while protecting the wetland itself. Again, as part of the Iowa Watershed Approach, our main focus is flood reduction, and so this wetland follows a CREP design standard similar to the Jellison site, where we were trying to reduce the risk of flooding downstream. And so we were able to work with the adjacent landowner on this site to get a temporary easement to back water up during flood events, and then during normal flow, just a small portion of water would back up onto their land as well. So right behind me is the water control structure. Inside this tube is our stop logs, which you can control the water level for the wetland behind me. The main purpose of that is, one, to control water and help maintain the structure long term, and then also if there's any habitat manipulation or any sediment that needs to be removed over time, the landowner will have that ability to do so. It's very common with these types of wetland projects as far as a design feature. So this site was highly unique as the landowner that owns the property attempted to build a dam here approximately 30 years ago on his own. You can actually see it if you look at LiDAR imagery and aerial photography in the past. And so they had the right concept of what they wanted to do, but the magnitude of what they needed to do was a lot smaller. So when this project came along, they were very eager and excited to participate in this project. Again, similar to like the other site, we were able to acquire some additional outside funds to help cover landowner portion of the project. The Nature Conservancy and the Iowa Department of Agricultural and Land Stewardship all contributed funds to build this project. And then the landowner on a voluntary basis gave up a certain portion of her farm for, one, the pool and the buffer area below the embankment. And the purpose of these programs and these projects is for reducing flood risk downstream, but also improving water quality to the streams and downstream. The other site, similar to this site, where we had landowners that were very willing and eager to voluntarily participate in the project without receiving easement payments, which saved the project and the state a lot of money. And it's going to be very beneficial for everyone locally and then downstream as well. So both these projects have earthen embankments that are built to store water upstream. You are standing on one now. On the other site, at the Jellison site, it was under construction. Both embankments are roughly about 12 feet tall at the highest point and have a sheet pile spillway for normal flow to dissipate downstream. So when this site is filled, past that grouping of trees will be the top of the water line. It's very long and linear, and then when a flood of high magnitude reaches this site, water will actually almost get up to the gravel road about a half a mile away. This site is working right now. As soon as we have the embankment built, they essentially can function as a flood structure immediately after. So this site is fairly unique, as we had quite a few landowners in the immediate area participating. This is the largest structure in this drainage, this 1,100 acre drainage. Directly upstream from this site, we constructed a pond last year with the adjacent landowner, and then another landowner, we constructed a wetland just a little bit further upstream that all drained down through here. So when we do go back to model flood reduction with the University of Iowa, we should be able to simulate fairly good numbers as far as flow reduction and flood benefit for downstream landowners.
All right. So Adam, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, you can submit those questions at any time.
For almost 4 years now. Let me try to share my PowerPoint here. Did that work? Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay.
If you want to hit I guess we're seeing the PowerPoint version, not necessarily if you're going to the presenter view.
Yeah, I just need to show the.
This is fine too, if you just want to proceed this way.
This be okay.
Yep.
So again, as far as the Middle Cedar Watershed, I've highlighted that on this map. So we're kind of in East Central Iowa. The Iowa Watershed Approach is a statewide program. So the blue highlighted watersheds are those receiving funds now. And the red are ones that were in a pilot program a few years ago. A little zoomed in to the Middle Cedar itself.
Hold on, Adam. We're still on the first slide.
Did it not change?
No. Can you go up to the top where it says display, and then can you switch presenter view?
There. Does that work? Yeah.
We're still just seeing the PowerPoint application.
But did my slides change?
No, so maybe go back to stop sharing. Sorry for technical difficulties.
Stop sharing.
And then share the, now share the PowerPoint and then go hit the presenter view and see if we can get there.
I got 3 screens here, so hopefully it works.
Oh, see, so we're seeing the screen that only has your PowerPoint on it. We're not seeing the one that it's projecting your slides to.
Gotcha.
So if you just want to scroll through your PowerPoint application,
Yeah, that might be the easiest.
we can see it that way.
Okay. So again,
There we
here's the Middle Cedar Watershed, East Central Iowa. We zoom in a little bit further. These blue highlighted areas are the sub-watersheds that are receiving Iowa Watershed Approach funds, or eligible anyways. And then the 2 wetland sites, the Wolfgram Wetland that the video was mainly taped at is here in Tama County, just west of Traer. And then the other wetland, Gehlen Wetland in Benton County, is just southwest of Vinton, about 8 miles. So I highlighted those here in red on the watershed, just for contextual purposes. Just wanted to share some information about what these wetlands look like from an aerial perspective and some of the data that goes along with them. This is the Wolfgram Wetland just in Tama County. So data table for that particular project, like the video said, about 1,100 acres of drainage. We're looking at about a 7.5 to 8 acre pool area once it's filled up. And then our storage data, as far as our flood reduction, almost 75 acre feet of berm storage during a flood event. So quite a significant amount of storage. You can see that there's 2 different landowners, as mentioned in the video. The property lines kind of runs in this area. And so the neighbor to the north, they have a flood easement on their property. And we're really excited to work with this project to make it happen. And so they were taking on a lot of flood waters potentially. And the drain time goes back about a 12-hour period back to normal. So that was a good project to showcase some of the during construction photos. Here is just the start of the dam, working on the core trench. So we start with like a 6 or 7 foot trench and start compacting our earth and materials in 6-inch lifts up through the entire structure. PCI was the contractor on this particular project. So they're just out of Rhinebeck in Grundy County, so fairly local. Just moving through, here's a stop log structure, water control structure going in the dam. So that is how the wetland is managed as far as water level during construction, and then also post-construction for as long as the embankment is there, which we anticipate will be there forever. But our maintenance agreement runs about 30 years with the landowner. Here is a look from the top of the dam at that control structure, so you can't see a lot of it. Water at low level with those stop logs comes through this pipe, goes through the dam, and then out in the outlet spillway. Like I said, to manipulate vegetation, do any type of maintenance or habitat stuff that the landowners may want to do. Sheet piling, it's not a great picture, but these embankments, because they treat so many acres of drainage, have an open flowing spillway. So those sheet pilings are about 20 feet long, and those get driven in to the embankment down into the sub base of the dam. They're interlocked together and welded and bolted together as well, just to make sure that they do not fail or reduce the risk of failure during high flow events. Here's kind of what it looks like when it's almost done. You can see the sheet piling is put in and cut to grade. There's a lot of riprap that goes in and around the sheet piling and the outlet of the structure, and all that riprap gets grouted in place to help it hold it there for a long period of time. So here is that process. They have a giant pump truck and a lot of trucks coming in and out and getting that put in place. It took about at least one entire day, if not two, to get all the grout in place. And this was done in July, I do believe, of this past year. The downstream side of the finished product, as far as the overflow of that Wolfgram Wetland. And then here is a front view of not quite the finished product, but basically the finished product of what this dam looks like. It's green now, but at that point the seeding was going to happen about a week later. So this is the low flow water line with no stop logs in. The pool is only a couple acres in size at this point. And then the other site that was referenced, the Gehlen Wetland. This is in Benton County, just southwest of Vinton. Very similar characteristics as far as a long linear pool. Treats a little bit more acres than the one in Tama County. If you're familiar with Benton County, a very heavily agricultural county, a lot of tile drainage. So about 1,300 acres come into this site. Our normal pool, once filled up, is roughly just around 13 acres. So about twice the size of the one in Tama County. We have some different habitat features that I'll go into as well. But you can see our storage information. Again, 130 acre feet of storage on this site compared to 95 on the other. So a little bit bigger storage potential. This site is it's a quarter section, so about a half a mile from the left side of your screen to the outlet. Very, very interesting, very fun site. Here is the back side of the spillway. Similar to the other site, it's sheet piling that's driven in the ground and cut to elevation. This has not had rock placed in it at this point of the picture. That was just completed here 2 days ago, and I have not been out there since. Kind of another look at top of the dam at the same spillway. Here is the front looking view. Again, you can see this water control structure, inlet structure, and then the sheet piling. Like I said, this dam was completed here just a few days ago, so I'll have updated photos if someone wants to see them later. More of a panoramic view from the southeast corner of the site. So this is a low flow pool. It's about 10 or 12 acres in size, and as of right now, it's only a couple inches deep for the majority of the wetland pool. Here's a drone footage that we got from with the help of the Iowa Flood Center. Some of the design features that we put in here were some diversion berms and islands. Not only create habitat, but also allow for more water quality benefits as well. So these will be at full pool, just be about 6 inches higher than the water level. We're going to be planting those with some native wetland plants and shrubs here next spring, as weather this fall did not allow for those to go in. And then here is that entire site. So similar to the other site, we had stream mitigation requirements, which we were able to do on site. So we restored this section of stream coming into the wetland. It's about almost 2,000 feet long or 1,000 feet long. We added some in-stream habitat benefits here with these riprap cross veins. And this is all seeded with native vegetation and a 100-foot buffer on this stream section. So that was all completed here a few weeks ago as far as seeding and grading. And so the majority of this property will be farmed, row crop farmed again, or as it always has been, in conjunction with this new wetland project. And that's my last slide. So kind of went through that fast.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and hit the stop share button, we have had some questions come in. So what impact on flooding do you expect from maybe both wetlands? Are they designed to provide significant flood storage during large damage flooding events, or kind of our medium flooding events?
Both. So both wetlands are designed to a 50 and 100 year flood event. And so they will be able to handle a substantial amount of rain and water. And that's what they're designed to do. So we did that intentionally, as we all can see that our rain events are becoming more heavy and frequent than they have in the past. And so we were trying to think ahead of the curve here as far as long-term design features to handle larger rainfall events in the future.
Someone was curious about how much, so this would be the first site, the one featured in the video, how much of the neighbor's easement is actually on cropped ground? And is there a specific amount of time that the water can be held there after an event?
So the easement on the neighbor, I believe, is about 12 acres, or I'd have to look back, but it's right around 12 acres of farm ground that has a temporary flood easement. And I do believe during a rainfall event that may fill up that much acres, the water level would go back to normal within a day. So below the recommended guidance as far as corn and soybean damage.
So as a follow-up, thank you for clarifying. Someone had their question about the flood reduction. How much of that flow will they hold back and minimize flood impacts downstream?
I'd have to check in with the engineering, but I guess at your normal flood events, like a 10 or 25 year event, we're expecting like a 70% or to 90% flow reduction. And again, that's within a day, it'll go back to normal flow conditions or less, depending on the storm and the frequency.
And so it's designed to have the water go up and out versus over that weir immediately to help dissipate that flooding event.
Yep. So when both those wetlands, when they're at normal pools, when all of our stop logs in, they'll be overflowing that spillway on a regular basis. Each of those structures have about 3 to 4 feet of additional storage before water would go around an emergency spillway. But again, they're designed to handle a significant amount of rainfall and flood waters before that would happen. And it may never happen. It's just so hard to tell, but it is there just in case.
Sorry, another one for you, Adam. Are the agreements with the landowners, you said they're curious if they're permanent easements so that the wetland stays even if the landowner changes? You mentioned that they're 30 years, but are they permanent in the case that if it changes in those 30 years, it stays?
So the maintenance agreement for the wetland is a 30-year maintenance agreement, and that stays with the land. And so if the land was sold, the subsequent owner would be subject to the same agreement. The flood easement on the neighbors, that's through perpetuity, because we fully expect the embankment to last longer than 30 years. And so if someone would want to remove that, it is under Iowa DNR dam safety regulations. And so there would be they would have to go through a process in order to remove that dam, but we fully expect it to last a substantial amount longer than the 30-year maintenance agreements that we have for the program.
All right, I've got kind of one more for you, Adam, and then I've got one for Matt here. Is the landowner using rotational grazing to allow more nesting time for birds, or are they not as interested in habitat?
At this time, they were not, but that was a point I brought up to them as far as once a project's done, they'll have the ability to rotationally graze because they have more secure water resources. So I do believe that they will be working towards that with the tenant that does rent the pasture. But I'm not a grazing specialist, but I did point them in the right direction as far as that being an opportunity.
All right, so Matt, just for those that aren't familiar with denitrifying wetlands, how do they help improve water quality? It was mentioned that those wetlands are following the CREP guidelines, also helping water quality, but how is it actually doing that?
Sure. So the wetlands are based on research and sizing based on the number of parameters. And what it's essentially doing is it's enhancing a natural process that happens in these systems that's driven primarily by microbes in the water and in the soil surface. And so those anaerobic conditions those microbes, they utilize nitrate to respire, and so they convert the nitrate that's in the water and respire nitrogen gas. And so if you think about, a stream reach or, a wet spot in a field or something, that process is happening. But then when you take a project like what Adam's working on and you make it that much bigger, you have more opportunity for those microbes to work and work on the level of nitrates in there. And so we're essentially creating those systems to drive that mechanism to essentially take that natural process and expound it to benefit water downstream.
So it was great to see the overhead of the Gehlen site with some of those structures in there, but what are some of the lessons that have been learned through the CREP program that have led to some of those implementations in these newer CREP sites or other denitrifying wetland sites, Matt?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we could talk about that we've learned, but that program, the CREP program in particular, is built off of research, and then it turned into a program that was specific to specific locations on the landscape and had specific criteria. But even then, as those sites were monitored and understanding advanced, we got a better understanding of how to incorporate measures into the sites that we do going forward. So, Adam had some really good illustrations of those diversion structures that are incorporated. So, enhancing the efficiency, the time to do those or when you're building the site, it's much more cost effective to do it on the front end than to try to come in and do that later. Once we got that and built a few of those in, we started to understand, and the monitoring was showing that there was some short circuiting happening and things. And so, by doing that on the front end, we can mitigate that, we can improve the efficiency, we can incorporate that into all of our sites. And so, that's one of the biggest things. The other is, just maximizing the size of pool to the watershed ratio. That's often driven by the landowner and what they're willing to give up for the land. And so once you have an idea of that, or, what the restrictions are for, soils or adjacent landowners and things. And so, again, you can enhance a site or get strategic with where you get the borrow it also enhance the site and create more pool, which then drives more of that denitrification. And so, those are the things that I really noticed in the presentation that Adam had, and the things that they're doing with their sites as well. And just having, Adam's sites really are expanding where we've had a lot of experience beyond where we've built sites. Benton County, Tama County, they're not eligible for CREP. So when that program was established, it's 37 counties. It's not to say that technology doesn't work, but that was a way to target and prioritize where the sites are being restored. But, just like any watershed project or, any kind of conservation project, that, there's opportunities to incorporate those. And so having additional resources to put these in is, one of the main reasons that IDOL's looked at this as a way to invest in it as well, to help sharing the cost and understand some of these things in a different landscape as well.
Yeah, and excellent. I should have also mentioned that CREP, for those not familiar with that acronym, stands for is the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. Some more questions for you, Adam, have come in. Just great work and exciting to see the implementation happening. Are there other wetlands in the planning process for Middle Cedar?
Yes, we've actually constructed probably about a half a dozen other wetlands, not to this magnitude and size, but we have several that are, a couple acres in size, a lot smaller drainage areas as well. As mentioned in the video, there is, for that Wolfgram site, there is a wetland that we just constructed here this fall, about a quarter mile or half mile further north, that drains into this one. And we, like I said, we have had several of those that we have built across both Benton and Tama counties. And then we have one that's in Buchanan County, right off of Interstate 380. And that is actually going to be open to the public, as it was purchased through the program. And so that the public will be allowed to go in and experience one of these wetlands that are constructed for both water quality and flood benefits. That's actually just right up by Brandon, so world's largest frying pan area.
And when's the anticipation of that one being done and open?
That one is done. It's open. That was
Okay.
completed about this past spring. So it's all seeded, screened up. I know there's been a few people that went duck hunting out there and do a lot of wildlife viewing. So it is now open and has been for a while. And that is actively managed by both Benton and Buchanan County Conservation. But yeah, it's highly visible right off the interstate. We still got to put some signs and stuff up on those sites, or at least that one for sure. I know on this, especially the Gehlen site, we'll be putting up some partner signs as far as contribution and benefit to recognize those that all have contributed to those projects. Like Matt said, the IDOLS was very supportive of this project. We also got funding through an EPA grant through the Iowa Flood Center that helped offset some of the financial contributions from the landowners, because some of these wetlands can get quite expensive. Iowa Watershed Approach has a 10% match requirement on landowners for construction costs. And both that Wolfgram Wetland and the Gehlen Wetland are very expensive. $400,000 to $600,000 total construction costs. So 10% of that's a hefty price tag to pay for a wetland. And so thankfully IDOLS and this EPA grant through the Flood Center, then also the Nature Conservancy, all partnered together to help get these built, just because of the financial burden on the landowners.
So this is probably in the design of and even siting locations, but how many feet of tile are there in each of the watersheds that you featured?
I do not know that. I know there's a lot of tile, just judging by tile outlets upstream, but I have no way of knowing how many feet or miles of tile are in this project area. I know in the Gehlen site, we constructed a grass waterway this spring that had about 8,000 feet that we added on for that waterway drainage. But other than that, I have no way of telling what's in the other farm fields in its watershed. I would assume that most of them are pattern tiled.
Yeah, and what's the size of the watersheds again, if you could just refresh us on that?
The Wolfgram site, that's about 1,100 acres. That's a little more, the topography is not real suitable for farming. So a lot of that drainage area is pasture, timber, and a mixture with ag land. And then in the Gehlen site, that is probably 85% farmland. It's a lot flatter, and that's about 1,300 acres. But I would assume that most of those farms are tiled to some capacity. So I know at the Gehlen site, the Iowa Flood Center has installed a bridge sensor that continuously monitors water quality and flow data going into that wetland. And I have not seen any of that data, but they will be able to monitor what's at least going in to that site. And then they have another bridge sensor a little bit downstream in hopes to actively measure nitrate reduction in real time. But that just started here, I believe, this spring as well. So we don't have a lot of data yet.
And you anticipated the next question that someone had asked about ongoing water quality monitoring at those sites. And I know that's something that's being done at some of the IDOL sites as well. So you're working specifically in the Middle Cedar Watershed, but Matt, if folks are outside the Middle Cedar or outside of the CREP, those 37 counties, who can they turn to that would help them determine whether or not their site might or might not work for a wetland?
Sure. They can contact our department, particularly the CREP staff. So if you just look up the Iowa Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, those folks are able to do GIS assessments to determine that. There are other sources, local NRCS office and those types of folks that could help assist that as well. But most of the experience is probably through our department. And we've been able to navigate additional funding sources as well that may be for folks that are outside the CREP area. So, Adam's funding has been targeted to those watersheds. And so, that's a great resource for folks in those areas or even in the other HUD projects. But then we recently completed or in the process of completing 4 constructed wetlands that we did through the EQIP program. And so that's created another viable funding source that's non-traditional. And so there's still a lot of things to work through and navigate with that. And but got a lot of great support from NRCS through that whole process and learning how to do that. And just like CREP and just like the HUD project, it's still, a partnership. So, EQIP pays for a portion, and then IDOLS or other partners will pay for a portion as well to help make that landowner whole. So following many of the same themes that we talked about here with this particular project, or things that we're talking about elsewhere as well.
And shout out to Jamie. Thanks for sharing the link to the CREP site. So if folks are curious about that and want to contact someone, there's a link in the chat, so you can find the contact information and more about the program there as well. Adam, I know you mentioned that there's a few other wetlands going on. There was a pond mentioned, now a waterway. What other projects are going on in the Middle Cedar to help with the flood reduction?
A lot would be a short way to describe it. So not just for my project perspective, I watershed approach, I just calculated out total number of individual practices over the past couple of years. We're looking at about 60 different structures, about 18 ponds, 7 wetlands, and 40 or so water and sediment control basins, grade stabilization structures, terraces, grass waterways, etc. And that does not include any other funding through like EQIP or NRCS type projects that we do not fund. And I do not have data on what other counties are doing. But as far as the IWA project, we have right around 60 installed, mostly in Benton and Tama County, with a few in Buchanan. Those are unfortunately only 3 counties that are eligible for this funding. And so we do have about a half a dozen or 10 or so more projects for next year. One of which will be another, like a floodplain detention wetland that will be open to the public and managed by Benton County Conservation. That's still somewhat in the planning phase, but it is expected to be completed next summer. So
what is the timeline then from identifying these sites to more or less completion?
So it's variable depending on the size and scope and some other things. The Wolfgram site, wetland, large type wetland, large basin, and there's stream and wetland impacts, which make permitting a little more challenging and time consuming. From start to finish on that site, we were looking just under a 2-year time frame, similar with the Jellison wetland. But again, those are not your typical examples of a project. What I would consider standard or typical for a pond or wetland that's smaller, more manageable in size, about a year would be a good time frame from start. Initial conversations through application, design, field work, and then construction. I know that's been about the fastest that we've had projects go through. Anywhere that year and a half, kind of depending on what time of the year someone signs up and whatnot. So it is variable, but usually the bigger the project, the more time it's going to take.
And speaking of when people come in, is there a time that works best? Are these rolling applications? Or so maybe open to both Matt and Adam. What do you recommend for when people should come in and ask about this kind of stuff?
I guess as far as the IWA, it was mostly just an ongoing application period, and projects forward as they were completed, just because we have such a short time frame to complete projects. We only have funding available through December of next year, and so we started out with about a $10 or $11 million budget, and so we needed to build a lot of projects relatively quickly. So it was kind of a rolling application period. We're getting to a point now where we're prioritizing more flood beneficial projects ahead of others, but that's because we have more projects than we have money. With other programs, I'm sure Matt can chime in there, but typically, if you want to do a project, the sooner the better, what I would say as far as applying or seeking information.
Yeah, that's basically going to be my answer too. So, we've tried to not let the programs drive a lot of this stuff. It's more, once the landowner's interested, let's get the site and then go look and see which programs fit. I know that's not the perfect answer because there's some unknowns, but that these types of practices are priorities for our department, just like they are for the HUD project. So that's made it easier to steer those, and you have a little bit of a luxury to foster that development and those types of things. And so that's what's helped foster some of those things. And Adam's being pretty modest, just the level of detail and steps that need to go through to make these projects happen. When we do a project, and I don't know if Adam's having the same issues or not, but I mean, we do one project, and I think there's some aspects of the development of the project that touches 4 individual federal agencies for permission or permits or whatever. And so, we might have everything, all of our ducks in a row, and if it sits in an office too long, or they don't like something about where our site is or the size of it or something like that, we've got to recreate, and we've got to go back to the drawing board, and that just delays everything else. Plus you throw in, landowner wishes and neighbor relations, and then on top of that, you've got the weather to deal with, and when you can get out and survey, and when you can get out and build it and do those types of things. So we were fortunate this year to have a pretty good fall, but certainly the last 2 falls were not very conducive to constructing. And so we've only got so much of a window to do these things. And it all, end of the day, affects the ability to get these in, because, that's what we're measured as, the number of practices we can get done without anybody really understanding what it takes to actually get them from start to finish either. So.
I've got another question that came in the chat here. Were the IWA wetlands a result of directly reaching out to the landowners with suitable sites, similar to like CREP, or did the landowners hear about it and make contact with you?
I'd say it was a combination of both. So early on, when our funds became available for the public, I hosted some landowner meetings, invited the public to learn about the program and engage kind of interest level as far as who might want to pursue a project or who might know somebody that would pursue a project. So that's how it started. And then it kind of morphed into landowners talking to landowners and referring people that route. I did do some targeted outreach for some ponds and wetlands to landowners that never responded to like a mailer or a public meeting. Farmers usually get bombarded with different things in the mail, and so if they don't recognize something, sometimes they just throw things away and don't know what's available to them. So it was a little bit of both. It was quite a bit of work with the outreach component. I was fully expecting to have a really big field day this summer to showcase some of these projects, but that got sidelined big time. So hopefully next summer we'll be able to do some sort of maybe bus tour. I have a lot of projects that are relatively close and easily accessible that I think it would be more meaningful to see in person. But obviously with the pandemic going on, I don't want to risk anyone's health for a field day. So thankfully Iowa Learning Farms was able to get some video and some pictures and whatnot. I do have more photos available through the Iowa Flood Center. We have drone footage of a lot of these sites, and so I could share some of those with people if they do request.
So I think Matt touched on it a little bit. Adam, you've been working with folks too. When you've got these projects that are touching multiple landowners, how do you negotiate that?
So with the IWA project, typically if it was multiple landowners involved, if they were both not supportive, so if one wanted to do a project and the other didn't, we just didn't pursue the project just because of our short time frame of funding. Fortunately, the few that we do have that have multiple landowners, are very close to each other and like working with each other, and so it made things a lot easier. So it can get difficult if the more parties you have involved with anything, it just makes more challenges. But like I said, fortunately, we've had some good relationships with the landowners and farmers already. So it didn't have a lot of hurdles to overcome on a few of those projects that do have multiple landowners. Try to keep it all on one site just to not muddy the water, so to speak, but sometimes that's not possible.
And I had a follow-up question to that come in. Were all of your landowners local, or were you dealing with some folks that maybe weren't what we call absentee landowners?
Yeah, so most of them were landowners that were local. Some of them were local but rented, and then there was just a few that actually lived out of state, and then fully rented property. The Jellison site, for instance, that landowner lives in Marion, and she's elderly, and then her tenant is the one that actually wanted to pursue the project, and we worked together on that one jointly. But for the most part, the landowners are local, or have a local point of contact to work through.
And then I guess I have one final question that I had for Matt, just kind of what are the available cost share options or programs available to folks that if they go into their NRCS office or they contact you, how do they identify where their interest lies, whether they're not in the CREP program or not in a watershed? How do they communicate that with their local offices?
Yeah, I think just, those are the folks that know kind of the lay of the land of what's available out there for resources. And so it's more focused on maybe the objectives. And so, is it a waterway? Is it a basin, or is it a large grade stabilization structure? And then, there's interest, and then there's actually feasibility and getting into the details of, does it impact the landowner or the neighbor and all those types of things. So, those are a great place to start. And so they can help navigate some things, but I know oftentimes it can come down to, well, there's, you're on the waiting list or something like that. But I mean, without starting that or starting that conversations, you're not going to know either. But there is some flexibility in some of these special type projects across the state that it might just happen to align in your area too. So I know that's not the perfect answer, but that's the best answer I can give at this point without knowing specifics of what's available.
Yeah, so there's lots of programs out there to find the ones that fit best for each producer, for each landowner. So while not every conservation practice works on every acre, there is conservation that works on every acre. So coming into your local offices, contacting the CREP folks there on that link that was shared in the chat are a good place to start. So another call, if you've got any last questions for Adam and Matt, I'm going to share my screen with the CCA information. I've also, or I will also put this in the chat so you can check it out there. So please, if you attended today for CCA credits, send that information to me by 5 p.m. today. There it is in the chat. And then while this is the last presentation of 2020, we do have a full slate of virtual field days scheduled for 2021, at least through March. You can find more about that on our website, iowalearningfarms.org, and check out the events page. But our next one will be on Thursday, January 14th at 1 p.m. We'll be focusing on miscanthus. What is the value for Iowa farmers? So if you're interested in maybe diversifying your crop rotation or just learning a little bit more about this biomass crop, I encourage you to join us on January 14th. So again, thank you all so much for attending. If you have any questions, feel free to, that come up later, feel free to email me and I can direct those to Adam and Matt. And again, this afternoon, you'll get an evaluation email with a quick link and also this recording. So again, thank you all so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy the holiday season, and we'll see you in 2021.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Matt.